It has been several months since the loss of Outpost Goliath in Paleo Park to the Draconis Miramis, so the Directorate of the MSU has approved the reclamation of Outpost Goliath. 250 hunters from the Hunters Guild and 750 helots, along with 200 security and scouting forces. The activation of Project Virgo has also been approved, and Virginia V. Vesta V will be sent to the outpost to lead the force. Our other outposts, including Ursa, Sigma, and Phantom, were more successful. However, the economic value of Outpost Goliath is greater than the other outposts combined. The human cost is regrettable. Project Virgo will have the power to overtake the entire outpost, even if the Draconis is still there. The Directorate will invest as much as it takes to make Primeval an economically viable investment. The following records were taken from A-phone accounts during the reclamation. They were compiled and archived by High Observation Notes and Overreach. Honor allows for effective communication and control over the outposts in Primeval, even with infrequent information and updates from Earthside. Those on the Primal side of the path are able to receive updates and help us help them. A note to the journalist who is receiving this information. Not everyone who is in these stories have survived. In 0. When I was approached, I was offered 20,000 centi just to listen, and another $250,000 upon the successful completion of the mission. At the time, I was an expert sniper helping to keep kaiju and leviathans away from the coast of Isle City. Apparently, the Mad Scientist Union needed help in getting a village or something back from some dinos in Primeval. I'm not a fan of traveling, but $250,000 is a really good deal. It is a lot better than what Isle City was paying me to ping bullets off Master Monday's eyes. So, when I had to leave, I said goodbye to my son, Peter, and goodbye to my husband, Todd. It hurt to say goodbye to them both. Peter was finally in secondary school, and he wanted to study in culinary school. Protecting Isle City from kaiju often meant that I had to skip many special events with Peter, but I had to keep him safe, and with this money, I could finally afford to take some time off. Maybe even afford a good culinary school for Peter. The kind of schools that came with connections, not just a degree. Before I left, Todd asked me for the password to the computer and the passcode. I just reminded him and I told him to put it on a sticky note next time, but he only smiled and kissed me in response. I don't need to memorize it when I always have you, sweetie. I smiled at his statement, and in my heart, I know he'll never remember it. It's a good way to get my attention and a good way to remind each other that we love each other. When I was loaded up into the ship, I was given this device called the A-phone and encouraged to record my thoughts and experiences into this device, so here I am. This is Hunter Sage of Isle City's Wave Watchers. It does have some fascinating apps, though. Apparently it plays music, videos from Share My Day, and pretty much all the apps on my phone, plus a few new ones. The MSU does not skip on their phones. My new A-phone was fully charged just by sitting in the sun for 5 minutes, and apparently it's bulletproof. And the oddest thing? It plays Doom, and it plays it really well. Well, might as well describe some of the others on the ship. Not everyone on the ship are hunters, like me. I saw plenty of others, and they saw me. Normally, we're competing for contracts, but a rare contract like this, where more is better, we don't compete and we share contracts with each other. We're sort of comrades in arms here. Even if we are rivals away from missions like this, at least we are professionals who understand the rules and how we all play. We'll swap stories and we're more comfortable with each other than we are with, say, the helots, or worst, the scientists. Apparently, the Imperial government has an interest in Outpost Goliath. There's a lot more helots here than hunters. The helots all look so sad. Their heads down and they're stuck in shackles this entire trip. They're not given any cool A-phones, and the only thing they can do for entertainment is talk to each other or glance through the bars to look at us on the deck. I know helots are enemies of the Empire who were captured to work off their crimes to us, but still it hurts to see how skinny and scared they are. They're still human beings, and they're still going to help us take an abandoned outpost that was taken over by dinosaurs. But they don't get paid like the rest of us. They serve the Emperor until they get paid, and they don't get paid extra for any extra work over the years of their servitude. During dinner in the cafeteria, they would watch us eat through the bars near the floor. Not enough space to reach through, nor get any food through to them. However, the smell of the food could still pass through, and they could still see what we were eating. But we couldn't make eye contact with them, nor could they make eye contact with us. It was cruel. It wasn't casual. It wasn't accidental. It was almost hellish. I know that helots are the bottom of the pyramid, but I didn't realize they were going to be tortured just by us eating. As I ate their sirloin steak and mashed potatoes, I couldn't help but notice the eyes glancing up at my plate, and I wish I could offer them something. But the food wouldn't fit through, and the scientists were looking at all of the hunters while we ate, and they whispered to each other. The scientists were the worst. They didn't speak to any of the hunters unless they were ordering us around. The way they talked, even to themselves, they didn't think of anyone else as having worthwhile thoughts or opinions. Even when trying to make casual small talk with them, they just kind of stared at me like I was an idiot. So I made my way away from them and I just spoke with my fellow hunters, and I tried to ignore the eyes glancing at my food and the pangs of guilt in my heart. Have you ever visited Imperial City? It's a lovely city for the most part, but there's districts where the homeless outnumber the people who live in homes. The city doesn't like doing anything to actually solve homelessness, but they still hate their own citizens. So there's spikes anywhere where someone can rest. There's gates at every doorway so no one can step out of the rain. But the cruelest part was the restaurant themselves. They have big windows so people can look in and the customers can look out. You can see people sitting on the street, staring at you while you eat, and you can tell how hungry they are, stuck looking at food they'll never eat. And the worst part, you can't help them. There's police on every corner enforcing Imperial City's strict no panhandling and no public food laws. Supposedly, they were introduced to make the city a safer place to live. What it actually did was make it harder on everyone else. If you see someone suffering on the street, starving, freezing, and dying, you cannot leave them a few coins to get something to eat. If you do so, that will make them a criminal in the eyes of the police, an easy target to strike. And if you try to bring food to them, then you're violating the law and you will be arrested. It's a firm reminder to everyone visiting Imperial City. Following the laws doesn't make someone good, and breaking the law doesn't make someone bad. Quite a few villains in the area, such as Mach 5, are well loved because they're the ones who are willing to bring food to the homeless and escape being caught. That was what this all reminded me of. A powerful leader who didn't actually want to help people, but wanted to punish as cruelly as possible. A reminder, not just to those suffering, but to anyone who wanted to ease the suffering. See how badly I can make them hurt? I can make you hurt. just as badly. I'm going to bed now. I will speak more tomorrow. Today was interesting. We passed by the Outpost Hotel, and when we ate breakfast, I could see more hungry eyes looking our way. This time, a hunter by the name of Jordan asked the scientists when the helots were getting fed. Apparently, they told her it was 9 p.m. tomorrow because dogs needed to remain hungry to stay loyal. So she punched that scientist and broke his jaw. After breaking up the fight, the scientist was taken to the infirmary and Jordan was confined to her quarters. But the helots got fed, so I'm sure she's glad she broke the scientist's jaw. We're not allowed to text her right now, but we have to head to the deck for passing through the path. I will update later. Kin 1. So, we just went through the path, and that was why I wasn't allowed to keep the A-phone on. We all had to remove the battery from the phones as we passed through the gate. Those jaws. It truly looked like we were entering through the jawbones of some long, dead, titanic beast. But they were stone, not bone. They were definitely stone. I had fought every type of kaiju and leviathan on the planet. None of them got anywhere near it as big as this impossible stone monument. On the deck, we were all in awe of the teeth as the ship passed through the fangs, with equally large teeth underneath the water. We passed by seemingly only a few centimeters beneath the keel. Inside the skull, all of our technology was turned off with batteries removed. As we made it to the center of the skull, where the waters of both oceans mingled. Where we entered from, we could see the daylight of the world we came from. And ahead of us, we could see dim stars and a dark sky twinkle from the other end. An exit that was invisible from where we came from. The other end of the path. The exit that would spit us out into Primeval. Spit us out. That was an accurate phrase when we passed through the teeth. On the other end, one head of Kukulkan ate us, and the other spat us out. Once we passed through the teeth, power was restored to the ship, and we were allowed to put our batteries back into our phones. And officially in the Gukamat's Ocean, the boat began to make its way southeast. First to Outpost Sigma, and then to Outpost Goliath to reclaim it. The night sky was enchanting. I had seen the sky all over the planet. I saw the millions of stars and the clouds that formed up the Sacabee galaxy. It was hopeful to see a sky so full of stars, so full of life, hope, and light. The skies of Primeval weren't like that. There were still stars, but they were a lot fewer. Still in the hundreds, but that was the problem. It was in the hundreds. The night sky was still a dark blue, but with a lot fewer stars, it felt darker, lonelier, colder. Even in the warm night air, I still shivered. There was no galaxy above, just a few weak stars and a spot of the sky that no stars were at all. Wherever Primeval was, the galaxy was still young, and it seemed we were a lot closer to the center of the galaxy, if there was such a large void in the sky. And then the next part I didn't realize until a little later, but when I realized it, it was no less shocking than the stars. There was no moon. I heard one of the scientists talking about how Primeval had no moon at all. That was enough to tell me that we weren't in Earth's past like some people believed. And we certainly weren't in our galaxy anymore. The cosmic significance of what was happening above was overwhelming enough to look away from the darkness above to the darkness below. Even in this distant world, the ocean still sounded the same. I could hear the way it lapped at the hull as we pushed forward at night, heading towards the distant outpost Sigma. I headed back to my cabin and I read over what my A phone had on the map of Primeval. Turns out it had an old-fashioned continent map. There were about 7 named continents compared to Earth's 6 continents, and 2 large islands with 1 named archipelago. Most of the islands on Primeval were unexplored and therefore unnamed, but even among the continents, they were mostly just mapped at the coasts, with much of the interior still a mystery. Hence why outposts Ursa and Goliath were so important. Ursa was an operational outpost at the Arctic biome of Cope, and Goliath was meant to be the outposts that would explore Primeval's largest continent of Alvarez. The one part that mystified me then was, if the outposts were meant to study the continents, then what was the point of Outpost Sigma and Outpost Phantom? I pressed my thumbs on Outpost Sigma and I got a quick pop-up about the outpost. Apparently, the isolated dinosaur archipelago was the metaphorical and literal gold mine of Primeval. Outpost Sigma was the first successful outpost in Primeval. What happened to the first 17 outposts, the A-phone didn't say, but apparently it produced megalodon teeth, lumber, oil, iron, gold, and other valuable materials, so it also served as the central hub of all economic activity on Primeval. It even had a functional tourism industry. The island served as a safe from larger creatures, while the ocean was shallow enough to avoid the larger sea creatures. A bit like those wildlife tours offered in Mayquill. It had enough safety that people could do it without dying, but just enough air of danger that people could take their pictures with a Deinonychus and pet an Apatosaurus and post to share my day that they petted a Brontosaurus, without a single hint of irony. After getting that information and a quick scan of the public houses in Outpost Sigma, before I flipped over to the location of Outpost Phantom, and I pressed on it, only to have almost no information about Outpost Phantom. When I pressed on the location, the only information that was there was Outpost Phantom is an MSU outpost on Primeval. Even the name of the island it was on was not shown. None of the islands near Outpost Phantom were named, and our route would take us nowhere near Outpost Phantom. If anything, our route took us much further away from Outpost Phantom, and quite possibly it cost us more fuel to get us all the way to Ida before heading to Outpost Goliath. I am not an idiot. I know that the MSU doesn't want us to know anything about Outpost Phantom, but if that was the case, they could have just said that the outpost studied soil samples, or it was a place to scout out ice cores for climate study. Something safe, boring, and would answer a question. Still, by actively hiding its purpose, it made everyone question why it was on the map. Kin 5. It has been a few days since my last entry. Sorry, a few kins. The days are shorter here, so the scientists insist that everyone calls it kins. Weirdos. But changes. They started feeding the helots every day, so I don't feel guilty every time I eat something in front of them. I also got a firmer understanding of my job. Apparently, they don't just want to kill all of the creatures in Outpost Goliath. They want us to either catch them, tranquilize them, or at least tag them for tracing. And the best part, we are getting paid a bounty for each of them. We get the biggest bounty for capturing them and tranquilizing them, but we have to bring them back and pay the second most. And tagging them pays the least, but even just tagging them pays very well. If I get even a few of these creatures, I can get enough that we can finally retire away, somewhere far away from Isle City. Maybe Sunset? But to break down the bounties, basically the larger the creature, the larger the bounty. And the creature they're calling the Draconis, that pays 250,000,000 centi just to tag it. Not 250,000,000, 250,000,000. 250,000,000 centi. If I actually captured it, I will be counting out copper by the billions. So yeah, everyone is on fire about catching that Draconis. However, myself and a few others know better. Sure, 10,000 centi for catching a Dimetrodon isn't a lot. However, you're more likely to find 100 Dimetrodons than one Draconis. So, working on the smaller creatures would still pay me well. Also, we were issued some modified standard infantry rifles. They weren't powered by gunpowder, but by gas canisters. Our guns would fire either tracking darts or tranquilizer darts towards the creatures. However, they would require our A phones to unlock, and our phones would keep track of what we shot and also who shot what. That way our bounties would be shared fairly. I guess that works, but I definitely prefer my sidearm over gas-powered tranquilizer darts. Oh, and we are also going to make it to port on the northernmost island of Ida tomorrow. So sadly, we won't be anywhere near the public houses, hotels, gift shops, and theaters of Outpost Sigma proper. So I guess tomorrow we load up some supplies and we deliver some supplies to port when we arrive, and then we leave the day after. I don't think anything will happen while that is happening. Kin 7. Well, that fucking happened! So, where do I start? When we made it to port, they finally let the helots out of the brig hold. The downside? They put the helots to work. They were our stevedores, unloading crates of hard drives, flash drives, and numerous blank disks, only to then have to load the ship up with steel cages, crates of darts, and even modular containers that would serve as building material when emptied. Naturally, when almost all of the hunters, myself included, protested, the helots doing all of the work, Dr. Vesta told us that if we felt it was unfair, we were welcome to help them out. While most of the hunters protested the way the helots were treated, being asked to load up the boat, I want to say maybe half of them offered to help. And after the first hour, only 10% were left. And at that point, it was less about it being unfair to the helots and more about doing what I thought was right. Even with my son Earthside, I wanted to do something that I knew would make him proud. Even though, honestly, how much of a difference did us helping really make? The only thing the scientists saw was the ship was loaded quicker than they expected. The helots were still exhausted and I got blisters on my hands and feet. But when we finished, I admit I had no small amount of pride to hear that we finished 3 hours early, only to be crushed to hear that we would be leaving at the same time to catch the tide. That night I got to soak in my tub and I ate up ravenously, but when I saw those eyes behind the bars, eyes that looked defeated and dead, so dead that the helots didn't even bother talking to me while we worked alongside each other, I realized even if they fed the helots that night, they wouldn't have a tub to soak in to get better. They would have to nurse their blisters for 3 kins on our trip to Outpost Goliath. I want to apologize to them, but I don't know what to apologize for. I helped them out the best I could. I didn't capture them. I didn't put them in cells, and I sure as hell didn't make them work. But still in that cafeteria, I couldn't help but feel guilty as I ate. Kin 10. Funny how a trip across an alien ocean can get boring. But mostly I have been taking the last 3 days to mermaid in the tub and look over the information in the Dinodex app. That thing has just about everything. Preferred environment, food intake, how many doses of tranquilizer to take them out, and even their calls. One of the scientists mentioned the person who made it also named the Draconis, so that's interesting. Still, though, we are finally pulling up into Outpost Goliath, and I can finally see it. The wall is visible from the ocean, and it looks like it is still standing, so presumably the anti-tank barriers beyond it are still standing since they're also concrete. As for the rest of the outpost, the towers were all knocked down and broken into pieces with the rebar underneath twisted and melted like they were made out of sugar crystal. The mortars were melted into slag that cooled into useless scrap, soaked in ash and dirt that would take a lot of effort to recycle into anything usable. The cafeteria was little more than shattered concrete and ash. Thankfully, the bunkers look like they're still standing, and the docks themselves are surprisingly untouched by the fires of the Draconis. However, the pride of Outpost Goliath, Paleo Park, it was gone. A burnt pile of ash where it once stood. On the ship, we couldn't even see the concrete foundations or the twisted remnants of steel. It was all destroyed, with nothing left. Looking it over, I could break down what happened. The Draconis was hungry and went for the paddocks first, consuming all the creatures within, but when the guards tried to stop them, the Draconis defended itself and attacked them, hence why the towers were knocked down but not the walls. The bunkers were untouched because evacuation procedures said to head to the towers during a dinosaur attack. Still, though, if this was what it was like in Outpost Goliath, then maybe there's no dinosaurs left to hunt in the outpost proper. This job may be just providing security for the helots and scientists while they got the outpost working again. I have to go. We are heading to shore. In 11. Well, my initial guess was correct. There were no dinosaurs left in the outpost, and Paleo Park was in worse shape than I thought. Even the concrete foundations were torn out by the Draconis. If I was to guess, it was looking for more food. There weren't even scavengers left over. The cafeteria was ruined, so we had to eat on the ship again. But we got to sleep in real beds again. Even the helots had their own bunkers. Locked from the outside, of course. It is more than a little concerning that the scientists who built this place had designed bunkers specifically for helots, even when they first came here. Then this morning I got up early and I brought my sir with me, even though I didn't think I would find anything, only for me to see a bunch of flying reptiles standing on the dock, dipping their bills into the water to grab a tasty fish. They weren't hunting like normal. They had learned to use the dock as a way to get easy access to fish. I fired a few shots into the flock and 3 of them fell over, while the others all flew off. I don't think they'll be coming back right away, but I should still pay attention. If the creatures were adapting to human infrastructure without humans, they may not be afraid of us. Still, my Dinodex registered me as catching 3 Dimorphodons, small pterosaurs that had 2 unique sets of teeth and a wingspan of 4.6 meters, a little bigger than a pelican's. Still, after getting those 25,000 centi bounties, the Dinodex also confirmed when I got closer to them they were new subspecies never before catalogued, and rewarded me an additional 10,000 centi. This almost felt like a game. Still, I dragged the heavy bird lizards to a large aviary cage and shut them in with a combination lock. And when the rest of the outpost started waking up, Dr. Vesta congratulated me on my find, while the other hunters murmured among each other, while the scientists all lined up to congratulate me. Almost the exact opposite of how it was just a few days ago, and I don't think I like it. None of the other hunters are speaking to me anymore, and now I think the competition is on. I asked Dr. Vesta if I could head out into the jungle tomorrow. She agreed. Tomorrow I will head into the primeval jungle. Tonight I will go over what I can get in the local biome, and I will prove to the hunters that we can all thrive together. Surely there's a lot of creatures we can get tomorrow. Kin 12. So Dr. Vesta approved it not just for me, but for all hunters. At breakfast, it was announced that all hunters are encouraged to go hunting to try and capture as many creatures as possible. The tranquilizer darts would have trackers, and the creatures would be gathered by the scouting security teams and returned to the cages. This would give all of the hunters a fair chance to get a few bounties. This is almost way too easy. I barely hiked into the jungle beyond the anti-tank barriers before I ran across a gigantic snake. It must have been 10 meters at least. But a single dart with a tracking microchip, 15,000 centi later, and I moved on. I can see why MSU loved this location so much. It's unofficial, of course, but I have done some unofficial work for scientists in the past. Endangered species are big business, especially in the exotic pet community, but species that are extinct? Well, big money doesn't come close to describing it. Science needs funding, so if they have an area where they can get plenty of creatures both to study and to sell off, well, then surely they're going to take advantage of it. There was also a bunch of large insects. Sadly, no bounties on them, but I am thankful as fuck that the bug repellent given to us works on them. I saw a meter-long scorpion walk by, and I immediately decided to go the other way. That was where I found the large Dimetrodon. It reclined in the swamp water, tongue out, tasting the air, with its sail on its back, gently swaying in the air as it dimly looked towards me. My Dinodex confirmed the largest of these get are 4.6 meters. But the one I saw in the swamp was at least 8 meters long, and the best part? On her back I could see numerous little Dimetrodons crawling along her back. Crocodiles and alligators did something similar with carrying their babies on their back. Apparently that applied to ancient synapsids also. Oh right, that was another fact from the Dinodex. The Dimetrodon wasn't a reptile, it was a proto-mammal, a synapsid, a very early ancestor of all mammals. That would make this one just so valuable. I aimed my sights and I fired just beneath her neck. She yawned when the dart hit her skin, and then she stretched out to pull herself partially up onto the shore before closing her eyes and taking a nap with all of her babies on her back. I took a picture and asked Dr. Vesta if I was getting extra for the babies. An alert on my Dinodex for 250,000 centi confirmed it for me. As I continued deeper into the jungle, looking for something larger, something that would make me even more money. This trip was already proving profitable, and if things continued like this, maybe I'll just sign up to work with the MSU full-time. I have no idea why they were struggling so much to begin with. I'm heading further south where the map says the grasslands meet the jungle. Maybe I can meet a big game animal, or maybe a big game hunter. Dinodex does say that Tyrannosaurus rex lives in the grasslands. However, they're apparently scavengers, not predators. So, just like other large scavengers, they should be real easy for me to hunt. I will update later. Kin 15. Fuck me, fuck my life, fuck my choices, and most importantly, fuck you, MSU. I can't communicate with Outpost Goliath or anyone from the Outpost. My iPhone just keeps saying they're out of range. These things can communicate with Earth from anywhere in Primeval. No way in hell I am out of range. I have to be only 20 kilometers away, at the most. Sorry, deep breath, start from the beginning. My name is Hunter Sage, and I'm about to die. When I last updated, I followed large tracks leading from the jungle to the grasslands. It was clearly a large theropod, or two-legged dinosaur, carrying something heavy. I figured that would be my Tyrannosaurus Rex. I fucking figured right, but I also fucking figured wrong. When I made it to the ridge, I saw the nest. There was a single large female dragging over trees and rocks to make a bowl shape. She had a large hadrosaur, the duck crest dinosaur, corpse near her, that she had half eaten already. The first thing I noticed was that the creature was feathered, covered in gray feathers along most of its body, and mostly covered on its neck. But the face was clear feathers. And the next thing I noticed was how much bigger this tyrannosaur was than I expected. At the hips, the creature was easily as tall as a 2-story tall building, and the creature was longer than a city bus. I lined up my shot, all of my darts filled with 10 darts ready. My dino decks immediately buzzed and made a loud alarm when the tyrannosaur was lined up in my shots. The noise made her perk up and look towards me, while I pulled up my phone to read the notification. I was up safe on the ridge. She couldn't hike up the rock safely, and since she was a scavenger, surely she would be more scared of me than I was of her. My dino decks had a single warning in red text. Do not hunt Tyrannosaurus Imperator. When I read that, I gulped. The Imperator was a proposed variation of T-Rex, supposedly 20% larger than the largest known T-Rex, and unlike being a scavenger, it was a predator. I glanced down to where the T Imperator was, and I saw as she backed up a few steps and came running towards the ridge. I took my hint and I ran into the jungle. As I bounced off as quickly as I could, I made a mistake of turning around when I reached the tree line. I saw as the dinosaur leapt over the bridge, almost flying towards me as I ran into the trees. Thankfully, she did slow down in the trees, but I could hear the sound of logs cracking, and I could almost feel her breath on my back as I ran, trying to get away from her. And I found a small cave in a cliff not too deep, but wide enough for me to get into without letting her inside. I ran into the cave, and the T Imperator snapped her jaws mere centimeters behind me as she stood at the entrance. I stared back at her, and even though I was standing very still, she just stared back at me. It wasn't like the movies. Even staying still, she could still see me with those deep yellow eyes. And I saw something in those eyes. Wisdom. She wasn't wise in a way that a human was wise, but she had the wisdom of a being that survived as an apex predator, that came from a long line of apex predators. She would be patient, and she would wait for me. In her eyes, I was just a small animal, a threat to her nest, and one that would need to be dealt with. So we sat there, waiting. I tried firing all of my darts at her while in the cave. I could line up the shots easily, but none of the dots penetrated her scales nor her feathers. Even when fired at her eye, she just blinked without a single dart staying. I couldn't tranquilize her, and I couldn't put a tracking dot in her. Out of desperation, I checked the Dinodex for some information that might help. Apparently, large dinosaurs could sometimes go months without eating, and they could go up to 2 weeks without drinking water. So I'm screwed there. My water was drunk a long time ago. At first, I was confused about why she was hunting me. I would not be able to feed her much, and there's much larger prey out there that would be easier to catch. I thought I could wait for her to fall asleep, but when the sun started to set, she laid down at the entrance of the cave, blocking my access but leaving just enough space for air to enter the cave. She was incredibly intelligent. Having seen that wisdom in her eyes, I knew she wasn't hunting me for food. She saw me as a threat to her nest and her soon-to-be laid eggs. So she would get rid of me, one way or another. So that was where I stayed for 3 kins, as I tried to contact anyone to help me. For some reason, I kept getting a notification from something called Honor saying they were beyond reach. I tried licking the dew off the walls, but I quickly learned that I was losing more water than I was gaining doing that. I even tried my sidearm against the T Imperator. I think I made her bleed a little, but it stopped quickly, so it was barely a flesh wound, and I don't have any more reloads. So now I have accepted my death at this point. Dehydration will get me in hours, so before I become too delirious, I am leaving my last message as part of the Legacy Protocol. I want my bounties given to my son in Isle City. That should be enough money to pay for his culinary school and to give him enough to escape that shithole of a city. I'm not scared of dying. I'm scared I won't ever see him graduate. I won't walk him down the aisle. I won't be able to tell him I love him anymore. Let my son know how I died. Let him know that I love him very much. And let him know I sought out the bounties because I wanted him to have a better life than me. My son, I'm sorry. I missed so much of your life growing up, and I'm sorry we won't have any more next times. No more times for me to catch up with you, to make it all up with you. I know judgment is coming for me, but just know that whatever comes for me afterwards, I am glad I had you as a son. You're the best son any father could have asked for. I don't care what your mother says. I am glad you are the way you are. The world is already in a better place just because you're here. And I know that you will be a truly great hero just by following your dreams. I love you. And for my ex-wife, I will see you in hell, bitch. If you so much as raise your voice at Peter, I will claw my way out of hell to haunt you for the rest of your miserable life. And for my husband, the password is our song, and the passcode is our anniversary. Karuti Phi Galagas Tisawag. From Honor. Messages were passed on per legacy protocol. 1,235,000 centi paid to Peter Sage of Isle City. The time of death is placed at 11:46 p.m., May 31st, 2776 AUC. May Hunter Sage's memory always be a blessing. Kin 0. This is my last mission. 7 long years of service to the Empire of the Seven Cities, and now I will finally have my freedom. and my stipend for all of my hard work. This wasn't how I imagined it would go when I surrendered to the Seven Cities all those years ago. After I saw what we did to those poor people in Central Hill, I couldn't live with myself. Sure, the king's words played for us every night, and my hands and heart were bloody to hell a long time before Central Hill. But Central Hill changed everything. Those fires we set, I watched as people's skin blistered with their bones beneath bleached and their fat melted, all at the same time as those moving corpses screamed at us. We were ordered not to fire at the bodies, to let the civilians suffer and leave them as a message to the Seven Cities. Those bodies, screaming, their clothes and skin fusing, their eyes melting, their blood boiling, while their desperate screams echoed through those mountains. Every time I closed my eyes, their screams overwhelmed the soft words of King Walker. Even when my eyes were open and I was at lookout, the corpses kept screaming at night. Even long after they stopped moving and they were dead, the corpses still screamed at night. When we were ordered back west, I trailed behind. Eventually, my unit disappeared. I doubt I was ever missed. Soldiers had been disappearing from the units ever since we crossed the border of the Seven Cities. A lot of soldiers loyal to the kingdom of Vespucci all their lives who never breathed a single whisper of defiance simply disappeared when they tasted potential freedom in the Seven Cities. I knew before I was going to be captured what a helot was. I knew what the years of servitude meant. We had captured helots from the Seven Cities, some of them the very same men who vanished, and we would have to guard our own citizens, because even the 7 years of servitude, weak payment, and a high chance of death was a better deal to the helots than going back to King Walker. The officers made sure we never spoke about defiance, and to those who they suspected of defiance, they played the king's words until their smiles returned and the light in their eyes died. So, when I trailed behind and I stopped, I knew what to expect with the Seven Cities. I was found by a squad of auxiliaries wearing earplugs, trying to make sure I'm not carrying any of our king's words. When they confirmed I wasn't a trap and that I wasn't carrying anything that could play sound, I was taken to a prison camp somewhere in Eden City territory. Once there, I was given 3 choices by a bureaucrat behind a desk. I could accept imprisonment for the rest of the war. I could be returned to the kingdom of Vespucci on the promise I wouldn't fight in the war anymore, or I could serve as a helot for 7 years. I would get no compensation until the end of my service, where I would be a resident of the Empire of the Seven Cities, and I could apply for citizenship 10 years after the end of my service. For me, it was an easy choice. Prisoners who returned to King Walker, who agreed to not fight anymore, only had one purpose: to execute, to show everyone else what happens to those who just gave up. The executions were very brutal, very public, and very painful. I had watched someone gradually have their limbs frozen with their core temperature kept warm, so they would suffer from frostbite so bad they'd lose their limbs while not dying of hypothermia. When their limbs froze enough to shatter from hammers, they were torched alive with flamethrowers. I watched people lowered into cases of starving rats that would tear into their flesh and eat as much as they can, and they would die slowly because the rats would start with their legs, and by the time they got to the vital organs, the rats were full. They would die from blood loss oftentimes, while they watched the rats crawled in and out of their bodies while still alive. And those were the quick deaths. For larger crimes, such as when a conspiracy to kill the king was discovered, they were all chained down with bolts plunged through their arms and legs, preventing any escape. And the conspirators were all sewn together with an unsterile needle and fishing line, all of them sewn together, shoulder to shoulder, arm to arm, and leg to leg, left to fester in their own filth and infection. And when one of them died, they were left to rot with their compatriots. Maggots, flies, and other disgusting parasites crawling from the dead bodies into the wounds of those still living next to them. They would be dead after a few days, but they would let all of the bodies rot before they were taken away. And the reason why we're all aware of it? King Walker had executions shown every Friday night. Sometimes they were recordings of executions during the week, but every Friday night from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., every resident of the Kingdom of Vespucci was required to watch the executions. Even businesses shut down while everyone tuned in and watched the execution while King Walker narrated their crimes and how they would be killed. It was an effective deterrent, but also one with many fans. People who looked forward to the execution hour every Friday, who would plan parties around watching the executions, and who revel in the suffering shown to us every week. I knew that the seven cities were not perfect, but I knew that it couldn't be as bad as what was waiting for me back home. So I agreed to be a helot. So I was assigned to the 700th Helot Division in Isle Cities. We were the ones who dug the trenches, the trains, and barriers for the legionaries who protected Isle City from kaiju. It wasn't fun, but it wasn't worse than what I was doing in Central Hill. The legionaries ignored me except when giving orders, and it was so much better than having every action scrutinized and over-examined. And every night the king's words grew more distant. The screams grew weaker, and I thought I would finally be free of my crimes. Then Hush became a hero, and my duties became a lot less in demand. I lost a lot of friends as they were all taken to other parts of the empire, but I remained in Isle City, now working as a stevedore, unloading and reloading military ships, some heading to the Kingdom of Vespucci to the west, and others heading to Primeval in the southeast. It was busy, and though I know it wasn't Hush's fault, I couldn't help but feel angry at any piece of news about the Coastal Guardians. I could have lived an easy career for the rest of my tenure, but no, I couldn't because suddenly legionaries weren't needed as much, nor the helots that supported them. But then I was volunteered to help in reclaiming an outpost in Primeval. Thankfully, my parole officer explained this was my last mission before my freedom was achieved. He also gave me something called an A-phone, which I'm using to record my thoughts. I found out it was thief-proof when another helot tried to take it from me, and he wound up on the ground shaking from the power of the electric shocks. So I figured this mission would be my easiest, but turns out they saved the most difficult to last. We were led into the ship, chained to each other, slowly making our way into the brigand hold, where we were released, but left to our own devices. Just above head height, there were small windows with bars over them, so we could see, smell, hear, and sorta see what was happening around the ship. It was more interesting than listening to the bulbs buzz. At first I thought there was no point to the windows. But when food was served for the hunters and scientists, I realized the point. We could smell the food cooking, we could even see people grab them, but we couldn't eat. No food was brought down to the brigand hold, and even when we banged on the walls and screamed for food, everyone in the cafeteria refused to make eye contact with us, focusing on their own food and refusing to even think about us. It was cruel, but even this wasn't as bad as it got in Vespucci. I remember more than a few days where no food was provided, so instead they had us file into the cafeteria while the king's voice echoed through the speakers. You've had enough. You've had plenty. You are satiated. You've had enough. You had plenty. You are satiated. Over and over again, until that creepy grin was plastered all over our faces, and our minds were convinced that our bodies were lying to us, and we weren't actually hungry. Nights like that felt like getting drunk or high instead of eating, and trying to convince yourself that you actually spent the entire time feasting. And this wasn't exclusive to the military. I remember it happening in school, and I remember it even happening around Saturnalia. When there was famine, the king would speak to us all and convince us that we actually had enough and that we were all actually full. I don't know how many times that actually happened. They all kind of blended together, but when I finally got away from the king, I realized how often his words dictated my life. Sure, the imperialists were cruel to me, but they weren't trying to convince me that their cruelty wasn't there. When I was denied meals, made to work 24 hours, or just denied medical care until I was hobbling along, they were being cruel because they felt like it was some cosmic justice. Some Vespuccian soldier killed a relative of theirs, so they got even by denying a helot a meal for a night. Whatever helped them sleep better at night, and whatever I could do to keep them from making it personal towards me. When the kingdom of Vespucci was cruel, they always had the mesmerizing words of the king to convince us that our injuries were actually our fault, how starvation was actually satiation, how our defeats were actually great victories, and how our dead were honorable heroes, how our compatriots were our enemies, how the knife in our backs wasn't actually there, so it didn't need to be pulled out. The imperialists weren't as free as I had hoped, but they had a freedom that they never even thought about. The freedom to know that their thoughts were their own thoughts. Even after 7 years, I still sometimes worried if some of the king's words were still echoing inside me, convincing me to do something I can't even remember. Still, I would take every single second of the last 7 years again to avoid going back to the kingdom for even a single moment. Still, though, a lot of the fresh helots were still bound by the idea that better meant the seven cities were supposed to be good. They complained and moaned about the lack of food, which only made things worse. It's hard enough to ignore hunger without talking about food. Talking about food makes it so much worse. When we approached the path to Primeval, the lights started to flicker, and I'm given a message to remove my battery from my phone until the lights come back on. So, this is goodbye for now. Kin 1. We couldn't see out and see where we were, but we knew we were there when the lights turned off and the thrum of distant machines turned off. There were screams and yells among the helots as one of our senses essentially became useless. There was a violent press for the windows and their precious weak lights. Thankfully, I was smart enough to hide underneath my bunk so they didn't notice me nor press into me as they fought for distant light. After nearly an hour, the machines started up again, and 30 minutes after that, the lights came on. Now, knowing it was safe, I put the battery back into my phone. I checked the apps, and I did find a message from a Dr. Vesta in my contacts. Dinner will be served soon. Even with that message and my stomach growling, I dared not to tell anyone, and I dared not to let myself believe it. False hope hurts a lot more than being pleasantly surprised. And sure enough, there was no food given to us that night. And while we could hear the scientists and hunters talking about how amazing it was to see an alien ocean and an alien sky, we remained stuck in the brigand hold. Each room had 4 helots to sleep in, a single steel toilet with a built-in sink that doubled as our drinking water, and there were long hallways built alongside and beneath the hulls of the ship. So we could hear and see them, but they couldn't see us nor hear us clearly. A reminder not just what we are missing, but a reminder to those above what they were missing. It's a lot easier for them to feel good about themselves by having people they could look down on at all times. We only had a few showers near the center of the brigand hold. No curtains, and the soaps were all liquid, made to wash both body and hair, and it only dispensed once, every 5 minutes. Supposedly so we don't waste it. More likely so they didn't waste more than the minimum with us. We were provided with a single change of clothes, a towel, and a single set of shower shoes in our shoe sizes. A lot of the helots didn't take the hint with the shower shoes, and they wound up with a fungal infection before the first day was done. And I made myself popular by a complete accident. I found out that the A phone could play music, and that the speakers were actually pretty loud. The others asked me to play the music in our small common space, and so I did. For a while, we all started singing along with Sunset Sonata, making up words to go with the piano, and just enjoying the warmth and companionship, even for a short time. Music offered us comfort when our world had none to offer, and since I was the only one with it, it made me valuable to the others. Another person tried to steal my phone, trying to use a sock as a glove to grab the phone. Turns out the A phone can shock even through fabric. So now the others are remaining friendly to me, but that's because I have something to give them. If I didn't have the A phone, I don't think they would have been so nice to me. There was a scuffle above. I don't know the details, but I got another message from Dr. Vesta. I had no idea they deprived you of food. Let me rectify this for you. I didn't bother to respond. Dr. Vesta must think I was stupid to trust her at all after she failed the first time. That's what I thought at first, until a hatch opened in our rooms with 4 meal packs inside. Simple plastic-covered trays with a soft plastic fork, but by the gods, it was delicious to eat. Salisbury steak, cold bread roll, and dry mashed potatoes. It was an amazing breakfast. And just a few hours later, we had lunch. Tuna sandwiches with a carton of cold orange juice and some crackers. Then we had dinner. Some crinkle-cut fries that weren't dry, still a bit warm, with some dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets with tomato sauce. I recognize the irony of the dinosaur nuggets, but tomato sauce was an extreme rarity in the kingdom of Vespucci. The kingdom that the company that made them refused to do business with King Walker, and tomatoes grow best in the Triple Alliance or in Sunset. We licked every crumb of that sauce. I texted back to Dr. Vesta. Thank you. She responded, I am so sorry you were treated that way. We need your help, and I don't want you suffering. If any of you need assistance, just let me know. I considered what she said. I had no real reason to think that she was telling the truth. For all I knew, if I told her what we needed, she would use it against us. Just because she fed us didn't mean she was being nice. Workers needed food to work. It didn't make her kind, just practical. Still, though, if she was practical and she valued practicality over cruelty, then at least I could use that, if I played my cards right. Kin 6. Ah, Tavid, I didn't think I would have to move so much. It's over. It's fucking over. But holy fuck, Mackenzie and her fucking horse. We had to move the boxes. They didn't bother shackling us this time, but there was no purpose. There was no purpose. There were security forces in every tower and they could see us, even if we couldn't see them. It was just another panopticon, so we had to act as though we were watched, whether or not they were there. I was unloading crates of flash drives when I watched a hunter named Hunter try to argue with one of the captains of security. It was almost comical. As we unloaded and moved the crates, I heard the captain tell the hunters that if we thought it was unfair, that they could help. That shut them up. I had seen others protest how helots were treated, but every time the overseers and captains said the same thing to those who protested. If you think the work is unfair, you're welcome to help them. Perfect argument, one that distracted from the actual issue while also appealing to their sense of laziness. It's one thing to say a burden is unfair, but it's another thing entirely to say a burden is unfair. So let me help you. The helots watched without trying to be obvious. Hunter turned from the captain to the crates, and then he did something I never saw anyone do before. He grabbed a pair of gloves and he made his way to where we were working. Let me help you, he said as he grabbed a pallet jack, as he guided it underneath the pallet and moved it out of my way. As he started, other hunters murmured among themselves, and some of them made their way towards us. I watched as the captain was not responding. Not all of the hunters were helping, but a moment ago I would have bet money on no one helping. But as they started moving things with us, side by side as companions, I felt something warm in my heart I didn't know was still there. By the end of the day, most of the hunters had given up helping helots. Quite a few helped out for a few hours and then stopped. A few came back after a break, but a few, like Hunter Sage, helped out the entire time. And during lunchtime, some of the hunters left and returned with bags of chips and sausage rolls with some more tomato sauce. I could see in the captain's eyes that they didn't like us taking a break to eat, but among the hunters, they couldn't tell us to stop. The hunters had stooped down to help us up, and now the captains weren't sure what to do. I didn't speak to the hunters, none of the helots did, but we still had a sort of friendship with them, bonded and bounded by a common labor. When it ended, we were let back into the brigand hold, tired and sore, but in the end with higher hopes. I didn't know anyone in the Seven Cities could act that way. Maybe there was something I could do when my tenure ended. Kin 10. It was a boring 5 kins. We talked with each other, and eventually our blisters healed. Some ointment was let down with our meals, and we started having communal meals. Sometimes we played music, sometimes we shared stories, but mostly we speculated about the future, about what kinds of creatures we will see in Outpost Goliath, about what we will do when we finally retire from our tenure. And for the first time, it really hit me that this was my last mission. I always focused on getting through one day at a time. Always one more day, one more mission, one more year. But now it was all going to end soon. I could have a future. Past was so bleak that the present barely felt real, and the future was something that happened to other people, not to me. So when it came to me, what I wanted to do when I retired, I responded, I'm going to see about joining the Hunters Guild. If they had people willing to help us just because it's the right thing to do, well, I want to return the favor, I said to my helots, some of whom nodded solemnly, others laughed, and then it went to another helot who talked about her desire to make cheese with the witches in River City. Apparently that dream made a lot more sense to everyone else here. I don't get why, since I never heard about River City cheese, but apparently it's supposed to be legendary dairy from legend. I don't look forward to all of the work tomorrow, but the sooner I finish, the sooner my mission will be over. In 11. Well, now the hard part has actually started. There's so much to do in the outpost that they broke the helots up into teams of 10. Each one had an overseer from the scouting security teams. The one assigned to me was a man named Carnot, who spent the time on his phone and gave only vague general directions. He didn't care about what we did as long as we didn't bother him on his phone. If anything, that was a massive blessing. I watched some teams dealing with fragile equipment with overseers who screamed at them for so much as stepping wrong. My team, on the other hand, was just cleaning up the discarded debris from the walkways and dumping them into large crates, some to be melted down, some to be dumped, and others to be burned. I heard whispers from a few other helots who talked about escaping into the jungle. If we get past the guards, we can head into the jungle. If all of us run, they won't catch all of us. And then we'll be free. They won't risk running into the jungle after us, he said. I sighed at the dumbass's words before I decided to ask the obvious questions. So, how are we going to eat? How are we going to survive? We can hunt, and we can find berries and other edible plants. Most of the creatures in Primeval fight back. Do you know the difference between a poisonous dinosaur and one that would just eat you if you try to eat it? And as for berries, even the scientists don't know which ones are safe and which ones are deadly. Studying plant life is a big part of why scientists need Outpost Goliath in the first place. Well, then we'll steal food, and we'll figure out what is or isn't safe to eat before we start eating the berries. The helot, I realized was named Larry, proposed before I sighed again. Food is closely monitored, and even if you stole enough for everyone to survive long enough to escape, there's other threats out there. The anthropomorphs don't live on Alvarez because most of the continent is at the wet bulb point. That's an environment where the humidity and temperature are both so high that no mammalian life can survive. Our bodies would cook during the day, and at night we would still die of heat stroke within hours, even if we weren't moving. And that's only 100 kilometers south of us. And before you say there's still a lot of places to hide, do you realize that there's numerous bugs and parasites that would kill us in literal minutes? What are you talking about? It can't be that bad, Larry said while I shook my head. Larry, I want you to realize something on a deep level. The scientists don't give us anything without an absolute need. They need us to do the job, and that's it. They aren't providing entertainment. They aren't providing more than the bare amount of stimulation so we don't go insane. They only feed us well because we are building muscle as we are doing physical labor. Our showers only work for 5 minutes at a time, and hygiene is important for preventing disease. And even with all of that deprivation, they provided us bug repellent, sunscreen, and water, and advised us to use it every 2 hours at minimum. If they thought most of us would have survived without it, they wouldn't have bothered to provide any of it for us. So, not only is it essential for our existence, but it is very essential. So, there is no way in hell you can escape and still survive, Larry, I told him, while I kept shoveling ash into the bags. You're an idiot. I thought I left behind all of the thought crimes and stupid smiles back in Vespucci, but I can see you're still the king's lapdog bitch, Larry said as he smiled to all of the listening helots. Look, I'll prove it to you. I'll skip the next time they tell us to put on repellent and sunscreen, and I'll prove to you that a real man is tougher than some bugs in afternoon sunlight, he said, trying to prove his own superiority by acting tough. Don't do that, dumbass. You're not tougher than Kinich, I said, pointing at the sun above us. A real man doesn't need sunblock, he said as he kept pushing his broom along the trail, and I shook my head and played my music to myself as I kept picking up debris. 2 hours later, Larry and half a dozen other helots were in the infirmary, nursing first-degree burns across most of their bodies, and massive lumps that were leaking pus, just from being bitten by the local mosquitoes. Suddenly, no helots were talked about leaving, and everyone made sure their sunblock and repellent was on every 2 hours without fail. That night, we were given rations and we went to our bunkers. The screens kept the insects out, but even so, we slept with nets over our bed. And even though the doors and windows were locked, with bars on the windows, none of us dared to leave. Well, it's time to sleep. Hopefully there will be an update tomorrow. 10:12. The hunters all left to go into the jungle to dart and tranquilize the dinosaurs and other creatures. No more help for the helots. As we cleaned up the paths, Dr. Vesta spoke to the entire outpost from a newly functional PA system. To help collect the newly documented lifeforms, we need search and collection teams to collect the tranquilized creatures. Anyone who volunteers for it will be rewarded with 500 centi with each creature brought back. That immediately perked me up and most others. Our service ended with getting 5 aura, or about 10,000 centi. So getting an additional 500 centi would add up quickly. Plus, it would break up the monotony. I tried to volunteer with Overseer Carnot, but so did everyone else. Eventually, they decided to take 5 people from each group of 10 and take them out with the search and scout teams. I wasn't selected, so I stayed behind helping clean up the remnants of the cafeteria. At the rate we were going, by the end of the month, the entire outpost will be cleaned up. And then I will be shipped out while another ship is brought in with fresh workers, while Dr. Vesta remains and she helps rebuild the entire outpost. Though I have my suspicions about what they are going to do, I cannot confirm it. Numerous steel cages have been removed from the ship, and the foundations are being cleared out for massive paddocks and for more bunkers. The MSU has a lot invested in Fort Goliath, and apparently they're going to keep investing in it, almost to the point of ridiculousness. Tonight, less hunters returned than went out. I guess some of them are taking the risk to stay out and get bigger kills. When I went out, I noticed not everyone had returned. When I asked a helot who went out and came back, he said it was because some of the helots were going to be working all night to bring in the creatures. Kin 13. No one let us out of the bunker until past noon. At that point, we were ordered not to keep the building, but to load up the ship. No reason was given, but Carnot was helping us load up the ship. I would like to stress that again. The scientists were helping us load up the ship, not just with crates full of hard drives, but also with the cages that contained the captured creatures. No one would explain what happened, but I did notice Dr. Vesta was missing, and so was all of the hunters, and most of the security scout teams were lost. When I asked Carnot, he only pointed into the jungle, and I got the message. Half of the helots were missing, and now it's obvious that the people left behind are just going to abandon the outpost before it completely loses control. With Dr. Vesta gone, and Dr. Handler is in charge of the outpost. And he ordered a full evacuation of the outpost. Now we have everything. We are now running. I'm recording this while in the brigand hold. There's a lot more space, but no one is relieved about it. I check my iPhone and I can see there's distress calls, but I cannot respond to them or even get the information about them. There's dozens of notifications on my phone, but when I press them, some app called Honor tells me I am not allowed to respond, but won't let me disable the beeps nor stop seeing the distress calls. In a very dark way, it reminds me of the bars on our windows and how we can smell the food, but we can't taste it when they're serving the scientists and the hunters. A reminder that they don't have to hurt us themselves to hurt us. They will remind us of the pain out there and how we are only not there because of them. Before Kin 14 began, all but one distress signal stopped. One by one, they all went out. I don't have to be a scientist to know what that means. Dr. Handler still hasn't fed us, and I don't think he's going to anytime soon. We're in a rush, so I snuck in a few rations for myself and I'm hiding it underneath my pillow, but I hope they bring food down here before people get desperate. Kin 17. We are just outside of Outpost Sigma. Apparently he pushed the ship as quickly as it could go the entire time, and we're carrying a lot less weight this time. We still haven't eaten. However, it seems the scientists haven't either, if the fact the outpost has been cold this entire time was any indication. We aren't allowed into the outpost for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I keep hearing the scientists mention one word over and over. Draconis. Kin 19. I got desperate and ate from my stored rations. No one noticed, thank the gods, but I am waiting for any news since we're still waiting here. I haven't heard any steps above, any machines below, nor any voices from anywhere, not even amongst my fellow helots. There's an unspoken rumor that everyone is thinking, that they left us here to die. I don't like it, but it looks like it might be true. Kin 20. Dr. Handler did try to leave us. I only got the news later when a security team came to our ship to arrest Dr. Handler, but apparently when Handler was given the news he wasn't welcome to evacuate into Outpost Sigma because the ship needed to be brought back to Outpost Goliath, he left in the night on lifeboats along with all the scientists who came with him. They're somewhere in Ida right now, but thankfully Outpost Sigma came through for us. They're sending us back to Earth, and my service is done. And the other helots who still have work in their tenure will have work in Isle City. I will be handing over my iPhone soon, but they wanted me to record this, so here I am. I don't know what's going on in Outpost Goliath, but I do know that they're taking the ship the research vessel Harbinger, or RV Harbinger, back to Outpost Goliath. Whether there are survivors or just hope, I don't know, but I do know that my part in this is completely over. From Honor. Former Helot Vi is now officially a resident of the Empire of the Seven Cities. When returned to Isle City, they were given a check for 5 auras, with a 20% deduction for imperial taxes. It is not known at this time if Vi is going to join the Hunters Guild or if they'll seek a career elsewhere. In Zero. So I was chosen to be the second in command to the glorified lab rat. If it was anyone else but the directorate, I would have told them to go fuck themselves. Dr. Virginia V. Vesta V was all smiles and please and thank you to the directorate while I stood there quietly, letting my work speak for itself like a real fucking scientist. Sorry that studies on bone durability and density aren't as exciting and flashy as paraneurology, and that Dr. Vesta was better with people. I bet if I wanted to, I could have the directors eating out of my hand, but that is not how real science is done. Meetings, connections, networking, grant requests, ethics committees, oversight, all of those things were just meaningless busy work that got in the way of real research. I would be perfectly happy just working in my lab designing new experiments, but I have to spend a full day every other week in meetings, writing grant requests, and talking to little people who thought they were my superior. Dr. Handler, you can't refer to grad students as lab rats. Dr. Handler, you have to shower at least once a week. Dr. Handler, you're making everyone uncomfortable. All pointless meetings and statements trying to contain genius they don't understand. I don't care how many more articles Dr. Vesta wrote. I don't care if everyone likes her better. I don't care if she has more experience. I should have been in charge of this expedition rather than a second in command. Dr. Handler, you should focus on learning how to be a good leader during this mission. So focus on the responsibilities Dr. Vesta gives you. Yeah, sure, Director Richards. I'm not the one everyone calls Director Dick behind their back. They call me Dictator Dick, and they call me that to my fucking face. He'll never understand the struggle of true genius. As preparation was made for the trip, Dr. Vesta focused on the boring logistics, crew manifests, and the inventory. All the boring shit that didn't matter. I don't get why she didn't have someone else do it for her. I mean, that's what I would have done. But no, instead she keeps asking me to do something only for her to take over when she finds out I haven't done it yet. Sorry, Dr. Virgin, but I have a process. It's not my fault you take over because you think 2 hours is too long to go over roll call. I wish I was given something that actually mattered. But she did finally put me in charge of something interesting. Rather than making sure the medics had enough ointments and antibiotics, she asked me to make sure that the helots had their meals. We had prisoners of war on the ship. Perfect for target practice, medical testing, and picking up trash in the bottom of the Marianas Trench. And yet, Dr. Vesta wanted me to make sure that they were fed? Fine. I'll make sure they're fed. Enough. In my opinion, most humans are a waste of food anyways. It's not like they're doing anything down there anyways. Why do they need so much food? Instead, I passed some of it among the other scientists so they had extra food, and the rest I just sent to the incinerator. It's honestly a lot less wasteful to burn the food than to give it to some lazy helots who aren't even working. And if they get a meal every 3 days, they'll still be strong enough to work. Plus, the hunger will be useful. You can tell them that you'll give them extra meals if they're the ones who do the most work. And then you tell them someone else actually did more work than them. Play it right, and you'll make the helots hate each other even more than they hate the imperialist citizens. It works on grad students, and they're definitely a lot smarter than some dirt farmers from Carvex who were dumb enough to be caught by prisoners. Kin 1. We're in Primeval, and I'm already bored. I had to turn off my phone for an hour, and there was nothing to do. Every other dumbass on the deck was looking up at the sky or at the ocean. Please, there's plenty of sky and ocean back home. If I wanted to look at them, I would just play a video of it on my phone. Even Dr. Vesta was distracted. I don't know how she ever worked on something important like Project Virgo, if she's distracted by some distant burning balls of hot gas. Also, apparently someone blabbed to Dr. Vesta that I was denying the Helits food. Fucking bastards. It's not my fault a dumbass couldn't keep his mouth shut when asked when the Helits were fed. I don't get why Dr. Vesta is angry at me. I didn't break the scientist's jaw. I didn't tell the hunters the Helits weren't getting fed. It's not like I wasted the food. I didn't hurt anyone. But apparently I'm on probation, and if anything like that happens again, I'll be tried by the ethics committee. I don't get it. I followed every rule. The rules state helots are not to be fed less than once every 3 days. I followed that. If anything, she should be in trouble for doing more than the bare minimum. We're scientists, not ethicists. Doing things ethically only gets in the way of good science. Doing more than the bare minimum only corrupts the results. And now I keep getting stuck with the dumbest possible jobs. Like checking the engine twice a day. Yep, the engine is still all in the green. Just like the last time I checked. Yes, there's still enough food. Just like yesterday, the day before that, and just like tomorrow. Whether I check it or not, it will be enough food. I don't get why I have to check on the engines and do inventory. Shouldn't she be assigning this to some idiot to avoid wasting my important time? I'm one of the best osteologists in the Empire of the Seven Cities. I should be doing something important, not something that's clearly a waste of time. Ah well, we are a few kins away from Outpost Sigma, and we will have a nice, relaxing time there. Kin 6. Outpost Sigma was boring. Apparently they looked over my notes on inventory and used that to decide how much food we were getting. If I knew that was the case, I would have fudged a few numbers off the biscuit count and added a few to the corn count. How am I supposed to know inventory was important? Back in San LaSalle University, inventory was taken care of by unpaid interns who wanted someone to sign off on a few college credits. Something we gave them to keep them busy and so that we don't run out of markers. But apparently, that's actually a big deal in Primeval. Whatever. Fuckers. I started taking my time checking on the engine. Just watch a few videos while down in the engine room. There's no point in spending a full hour checking those dials. They're all in the green, just like always. I just repeat those numbers on the ledger. Maybe vary it by 1 or 2 points so no one gets suspicious. And I do the same thing for inventory each day. No one will ever know the difference. It's not like we can even get new supplies until we go back to Outpost Sigma. Oh well, back to my videos until we go back to Earth, I guess. In 10. What the hell does all hands on deck mean? And why does Dr. Virgin declaring all hands on deck means that I have to fucking wake up? Yay, we made it to Outpost Goliath. But I shouldn't even be doing anything to set up equipment in infirmaries. I should be learning how to lead, but apparently the scientists are supposed to get their hands dirty. I thought I was supposed to be a fucking leader. But apparently, neither Dr. Vesta nor myself had time to lead because we were too busy cleaning up the bunkers and setting up medical equipment in the infirmary. I didn't even have time to sneak away and watch a video because there was an entire list of things I had to do. I wasn't even allowed to go to lunch until my list was done. And by the time I was done setting up the infirmary, the dinosaur nuggets were cold and the tomato sauce was hot. Fucking barbaric. I don't get what kind of leadership position I am supposedly training for. Real leaders don't get their hands dirty. The Emperor doesn't go down to the street to pick up trash. The King of Vespucci doesn't spend time giving eye exams. The Prime Minister of Sunset doesn't take selfies with tourists. Okay, yes, he does, but democracy isn't a real government. The Pili of the Triple Alliance didn't join the Macahuele in farming cocoa and vanilla beans. Real leadership comes from orders and strength, not from digging in the dirt and building clinics. Ah, Tavit, we have lights out at sunset now? And she wants us to wake up at sunrise in 9 hours? Is she fucking insane? Well, if I survive, I'll make another fucking recording tomorrow. Kin 11. Some fucking dumbass pellets came in today with sunburns and insect bites. How stupid can you be that you get yourself hurt over something like that? So now we had to apply burn cream and other gross creams to the helots. Another waste if you ask me, but Dr. Vesta said if I refused anyone, I would be shipped back to Earth with a resignation letter. So, instead of using stem cells to build armor out of bone, here I am treating temporary blindness, first-degree burns, and anaphylactic shock like a fucking school nurse. The helots will be in recovery for 3 kins. On bed rest with full rations, and when they're done, they'll get another exam before they're cleared to go back to work or back to Earth. Gods, I wish that was me. Maybe I should let myself get a sunburn so I can get away from this job. Yeah, that'll show Dr. Vesta. I bet this entire outpost would fall apart without me here to keep it all together. I bet the hunters revolt and take the helots with them into the jungle. Probably get eaten by some Tyrannosaurus. Yeah, that'll fucking show them. Kin 12. I'm waiting on my sunblock idea. For now, but something interesting has happened. Apparently Dr. Vesta has gotten some news from the hunters out in the jungle. I don't know the specifics, but she keeps glancing into the jungle and she actually looks scared. I didn't realize the flawless Dr. Virginia V. Vesta V even got scared. Ah well, whatever it is, it's not my fault. I volunteered to be with the Helots, so now I'm watching movies with them in bed while everyone else is working hard. Later. So, clearly something is happening. Dr. Vesta went into the wild with most of the scout security teams and all of the hunters. I was left with a few overseers and the Helots. It must have been urgent because she'd left after lights out and she actually left me in charge. She told me I'm supposed to keep the outpost going and to try to get it working as soon as possible. When I asked her why she was worried, she almost looked like she was going to answer the question. But instead she told me to just tell the hunters they needed some assistance. So she went into the jungle with them and left me with the skeleton force. Apparently I'm supposed to get the outpost working tomorrow, and I already have a few ideas. Pin 13. So, that happened. The day started well. Everyone important had breakfast together, and we talked about what we had back home on Earth. A lot of scientists apparently broke the lonely nerd stereotype by having partners back home. Well, even knowing that, I told them I'm just happy to be in charge. We left the helots inside, figuring it would be okay to give them a day off in the bunker. And if they didn't get any food, it's not my fault. Then something happened. The ground shook, and in the distance I could see that there were flames in the jungle. Not any flames, but powerful blue flames that shot so high it parted the clouds above. It was only for a few seconds, but everyone could see it. So, whatever Dr. Vesta and the hunters are dealing with, I'm not dumb enough to find out and get eaten. So, we let the helots out and had them load up the ship. I ordered a full evacuation and shipped off within the hour. No one argued with me because they all saw how far those flames burned. And quite honestly, no one is willing to deal with nuclear fire today. So, when we had enough on the RV Harbinger, we left with everyone who was left, and we pushed at full emergency speed. Once we got 20 kilometers away, someone tried asking me about slowing down. I refused to listen. Whatever that was as powerful as an Eigen weapon. This isn't a scenario where we could fight and win. Dr. Vesta can request that I stay at Outpost Goliath all she wants, but she can't fire me if she's dead. Kin 14. So Dr. Vesta fired me. Bitch. I got the notification from a text. You're fired. From Dr. Vesta. My final check was confirmed to be deposited to my bank. Motherfucker. After everything I did for her and everyone else, she fires me? She kept trying to text me to get me to turn the ship around, but I'm refusing. Living is much more important. I know what the MSU says about breaking the rules, but honestly, that just united everyone with me. Everyone who ran was fired, so now instead of there being a debate about whether to go back or not, everyone agreed it was better to go to Outpost Sigma United. If we survive, then we can argue that we had to disobey to survive. If we go back, then we agree we're following her orders, including the fact we're fired. Also, I learned today, apparently emergency speed also means that there's not enough power for the cafeteria, so the food has spoiled. So we've been eating snacks, and soon we will reach Outpost Sigma, and I know we'll make it without any issues. Kin 17. We made it to Outpost Sigma, and the engine is apparently now unable to run anymore. No one told me that running the ship on emergency speed would cause the engine to burn out. I don't know why no one told me and why no one went down to the engine room to check. Is it my job to do everything? When we made it to the harbor, we called in, and immediately the port authority told us that we were now wanted by the directorate. Apparently, Dr. Virgin called ahead and told them to expect us. Apparently, we are guilty of disobeying a direct order, manslaughter, grand theft, and piracy for taking the RV Harbinger after being fired. What did they expect us to do when we were fired? Swim back? So now a few ships are approaching, but they're in no rush because they know the engine was burnt out. I don't know what to do now. No one wants to surrender to the MSU. There's talk of execution. We aren't in any country's domain, and here there's only the Mad Scientists Union, and they can do anything they want. I know what I would do if I was in charge of the MSU. So, telling everyone what I knew, everyone agreed with me. We're going to load up onto the lifeboats tonight and try to swim over to Isle Sigma. No one in Outpost Sigma goes to Isle Sigma, and there's supposed to be a village deep in the interior. We will make it there and escape no problem. If there's a village made by anthropomorphs, then we can survive. We're a lot smarter than they are, so we can definitely use anything they left behind. Anything to get away from execution. I am confident, and I know everything will work out. Kin 18. I'm the last survivor. No one told me that there's Quetzalcoatlus on Isle Sigma. They got everyone else as I ran through the village. Now I'm hiding in one of the stone cabins. How was I supposed to know I was leading them into a nest? How was I supposed to know these bird lizards were strong enough to fight and win against a T-Rex? How was I fucking supposed to know they're too big to take down with a single fucking shot? None of this is my fault. It wasn't my fault that I was the only one smart enough to hide in the cabin when they started eating us. It wasn't my fault that I locked the door and kept them outside of the cabin. It was clearly every man for himself, and I was the only man smart enough not to fight back, and not dumb enough to try and save the others. If they weren't so dumb, they would have made it into the cabins themselves. None of this is my fault. Please, if the directorate is listening, please save me. I'll accept my firing. I'll even accept my execution. Just save me from these creatures. None of what went wrong is my fault, and I don't deserve this. None of this is my fucking fault. From Honor. The rescue of Mr. Handler was approved by a slim majority by the Directorate. By the time a rescue team could be found, Mr. Handler was confirmed deceased. Cause of death is unknown, but likely due to large predators on Isle Sigma. The near failure of Outpost Goliath is solely the responsibility of Mr. Handler. His doctorate, accolades, and credit as a member of the MSU were all posthumously removed due to admitting to committing fraud with important records. In unknown. That isn't a recording error. I have the date removed. Yes, removed. Get high enough in rank, you have access to all kinds of fun things. And if you're clever enough in cyberpsych, you can do some really fun things with things made to be unhackable and impossible to tamper with. As for why I'm tampering with Honor's ability to keep track of me, it should become clear soon enough. Sometimes there's information I intend to share with you, my dearest friend, that I do not want shared with our mutual friends. There is a lot they don't want shared, and it's important that it is shared, for when the time is right. Well, time to introduce myself. I am Dr. Virginia V. Vesta V, obviously a pseudonym used by the Mad Scientist Union. However, that might as well be my name, since that's the only consistent name I've used over the last 20 years. It's been so long that I don't even remember what my praenomen nor nomen were. I did keep my cognomen, Vesta. Yeah, I know. Passed on from my mother, who insisted I carry on the name of the goddess of the hearth from our homeland. Even when I went to university in Asile, I kept Vesta. Even when I got my first doctorate in paraneurology, I kept Vesta. Even when I went to San LaSalle's, I kept Vesta. Even after I got my second doctorate in cyberpsychology, I kept Vesta. Even when I was the head scientist and sole survivor of Project Virgo, I kept Vesta. It was a good thing I did too. Most of my memories before university are blocked out for my access. My dearest friend, I don't know why, but I do know how. Apparently, I have blocked my own access to these memories. I don't know why, but I have found notes and records to myself warning me not to access them. I know myself. Not even death scares me. But the woman who left those records for me was terrified. So even though I have the vault and I have the keys, I am keeping it shut. But I am trusting you to find out what I am keeping from myself. There's few people who can help me, and even fewer I can trust. So, my dearest friend, someone who would care for a stranger, someone who seeks out the truth even when it's hidden, someone who has evaded even the seven cities, I ask you for your help. I share this story willingly in trade. I feel it has some of the answers because, well, you'll see why soon enough. But even if it didn't, the story needs to be told. Kin Zero. When I was chosen by the Directorate, I eagerly accepted the mission. I haven't had a major project since Project Virgo, and honestly, after that fiasco, I was glad to have a chance to lead again. I was not a fan of having Dr. Larry Handler on board as my second in command, but they needed me to teach him to lead. Apparently, he annoyed Director Dick enough to convince him he was ready for more responsibility. I was initially surprised that I was chosen to lead so suddenly and with no input, only for me to come to the ship and realize that apparently I had been helping the Directorate plan this mission for almost a year now. Almost immediately after Dr. Miriam went missing, I was chosen to not just lead this expedition, but also plan it all. I found my notes that planned out everything, from how much sunblock was needed to how to manage the hunters and security teams by their skill sets. This was very well organized, and everything matched my style of writing and thought process, all the way down to how I write the dates. So, after consulting my notes, I decided to trust myself and continue the mission, bringing the ship to Primeval. This was going to be a tricky trip for me. I did have my medication with me, plenty of lithium, clozapine, and most important of all, Sebocap, to manage my mood, my mind, and my malaise. However, getting through the path would also mean that I would have to remove the battery to my implant. Normally, there's very strict rules. Anyone with important biotechnology implants are not allowed to go through the path to Primeval. Having the technology powered would have it fried when it went through the path in the stone skull. For people with things like powered prosthetics, hearing aids, or insulin pumps, it's a relatively simple process to remove the batteries for a few minutes. Bit dangerous, but manageable. Then there were people who had the batteries kept in their bodies, such as pacemakers. They were completely screwed. The process of replacing a pacemaker, because you have to replace the entire device, not just the battery, can take up to 45 minutes. Humans can't survive 45 minutes without a heart, not without electricity, unless the MSU is willing to invest in hamster-powered extracorporeal oxygenation. As silly as that sounds, that was a proposed idea after hand cranks were found to not be effective. I was somewhere in the middle. I could remove my battery fairly easily because it was kept behind my left ear, with the main body of the device on my parietal bone, resting just beneath my skin. A wonder of biotechnology and a part of my thesis on paraneurology. I was used to removing my batteries to be replaced or when I was in the shower. However, I would have to go over an hour without my inhibitor implant in. As we approached the stone skull, I kept the battery on for as long as I could, but as we approached the stone teeth, I had no choice as I turned my inhibitor off, and I removed the battery, keeping it tight in my hand as I felt everything without it. It's a little similar in appearance to a cochlear implant, a device used to allow some people with specific forms of deafness to hear through artificial means. My device, however, did almost the exact opposite. It wasn't designed to give me access to an extra sense. It was designed to limit or even remove access to a sense. I am XMA. I have access to extraordinary abilities that seem to be a part of who I am. Some argue it's genetics, others say it's deeper than that, and others think I was exposed to something that gave me these abilities. Whatever the source, it does not matter. What mattered in that moment was keeping myself afloat in an ocean of thoughts. I hear it's easier to explain if I give an analogy. Are you familiar with epilepsy? a condition that can cause you to seize or even pass out with the wrong kind of stimulation, usually flashing lights. Now imagine you are epileptic and it's flashing from every angle, in every pattern, in every color, all the time, and even closing your eyes doesn't make it go away. That was a tiny fraction of what it was like when I turned my regulator off. My regulator off, I could hear every thought on the ship. And I don't merely mean the thoughts people actively think, but everything people parallel process without even thinking about it. You don't think about standing or how the air feels, the feeling of clothing on your skin, how the ship smells, or what you see and what you have going on in your subconscious. Most neurotypical minds naturally filter out the noise and focus on what is needed. Neurodivergent minds may have a difficult time filtering noise from data. There's still a limit to how much data is being received. All of my limits are removed when my inhibitor was turned off. In that moment, I was in every mind on the ship at the same time. There are thoughts, sensations, emotions, subconscious fears, anxieties, pain, joy, memories, every stray thought, sub-thought, and feeling flowed through my mind like it was my own. Hundreds of times over while I gripped tightly to the rungs while I let my barriers build back up. It would allow me to separate my own thoughts from everyone else's, allowing a thin sort of focus that I could focus into building further barriers. My earliest barriers were flimsy and barely concealed anything. It was like being in a crowded convention with only a thin paper wall to separate me from the loud noises, bright lights, smells, and the crowds beyond. Something that could easily be bypassed, but it gave me time to focus and strengthen the barriers. I focused on what I knew made up myself, the thoughts, memories, and sensations that made me up, even the things I had forgotten, even the things I wish I could forget, and the negative space between memory and forgetting that made up my subconscious mind. Those lines drawn, I built up my barriers more and more. Eventually, the paper walls became more like drywall and cinder block. The loud noises could still be heard, but it was a vague noise rather than screaming inside my head. My focus back, I opened my eyes as I watched the ship pass underneath the stone teeth. If you wonder why I don't just use my organic barriers instead of the inhibitor, it's because it's a lot of work. It would be like carrying something heavy over increasing distance. You can carry something heavy for a while, but the longer you do it and the heavier it gets, the more likely you get to hurt yourself. The inhibitor is helpful to live as a person. I watched the ship pass through the other side, where there were a few weak stars above and a lot more lights below. When I said I could feel minds and thoughts, it isn't merely limited to humans. For those few minutes across on the primeval side, I could feel the millions of unique minds on that side. Their minds weren't human at all, and a lot of them didn't have thoughts in the way that humans understand thoughts. But there were still similarities. All the fish, crustaceans, and sea reptiles worried about the strange thing above, searching for food, for a mate, for safety, for something to play with. I placed the battery in my inhibitor and let the systems in place defend me from all of the invasive thoughts. As I withdrew from the world around me, I let out a sigh, relieved to be free from being overwhelmed, but also a piece of me missed the feeling so much. The world was a confusing place, and knowing everyone's thoughts around me showed how unscary the world actually was. My anxiety about others was unfounded, and they were all so boring and yet so interesting, and my connection to them, gone with my abilities, focused only to what I wanted. I was ready to lead everyone into a new future. In unknown, the sensation of being uninhibited is a dangerous feeling, not because it's painful, but because it's all encompassing. When you're inside everyone, then everyone is inside of you. You may lose a piece of yourself inside someone else, or you might take a piece of them into yourself, and you may never even learn about what you lost or what you gained. If it feels like I'm exaggerating, I want you to think about how much of what makes up you is from the people around you, your holidays from those celebrated around you, your perception of taste, music, even color, and philosophy, influenced by those around you. How often have you heard something you thought was wise from someone else, so you started using it? How often did you say something and watch as others around you pick it up? Could you always tell the difference? How many things do you avoid to keep it from influencing you? How many things do you seek and hope it influences you? Every time I disable my inhibitor, that is the risk I take. I don't know how much of myself I have already lost. I don't know how much of myself I have given, and I don't know how much from others I've taken or how much I've received. I don't know how much is left of me to lose. I don't even know if there's a part of me that is truly me. Am I still me? Or am I a sponge made up of a billions of unrelated thoughts and memories, all masquerading as a single being? It's hard to trust others, but it's even harder to trust myself. So instead of trusting myself or trusting others, I am choosing to trust you, my dearest friend. You had concepts of the self beyond memories, beyond thoughts, beyond mind, even beyond the self. If there's anyone who would know anything, it would be you. Kin 5. I don't remember much over the last few kins. I know I did my job. Apparently, I snapped at Larry Handler about how he did something stupid. Apparently, he was denying the helots food, and I made sure the helots were getting fed. I found more notes for myself, explaining about what duties everyone has and what my responsibilities are. I don't know about where I go when that happens. I was taking my medication, and as far as I can tell, I don't have a system inside my mind. I was taking my medication at the time, and as far as I can tell, no one noticed that I was missing. Still, it is very strange to have entire days where you're speaking to others, but you can't even remember what happened. I will need to speak to my psychiatrist when I get back. Maybe my SIBO cap needs to be increased again. We will be approaching Outpost Sigma soon. The hunters are already getting bored, and Dr. Handler is being a handful. No matter what I give him, he decides it's a waste of his time. Why did I ever agree to taking him along? Kin 7. I trusted Dr. Handler to handle the inventory and the overseers to understand what was or wasn't needed on the ship. I had a lot of paperwork to do in Outpost Sigma. I passed by many crates full of many odd things that seemed to follow no system that I could understand. I walked past a crate full of rivets, past a crate full of diamonds, and then I would walk past a model Spinosaurus skeleton kept inside a massive cage that had red lines marking not to get close to the cage to avoid getting hurt. Inside the administrator building, I had to fill out hundreds of pages of paperwork explaining my responsibilities on Outpost Goliath. They were straightforward enough to understand, However, someone doesn't get 2 PhDs by signing paperwork without reading it. That's how you get people like Larry. I spent all day working on the papers across from Special Researcher Levi. The entire time I was working, I could see he was on the brink of tears, as he spent the entire time working on his computer. I could see small earbuds lying on the desk, playing music while he was too focused on the computer to actually listen to the music. I don't know how long his music was playing without him listening, but if I was to guess, it was at least as long as the directorate essentially exiled him to Outpost Sigma. Here you go, I said, handing him the papers, and he added his stamp as he wished me luck, while I headed back to the RV Harbinger. On the RV Harbinger, when I asked Dr. Handler what happened, he told me nothing, except they finished loading 3 hours early. I am glad that worked out for him and everyone else. Kin unknown. When speaking to those that control your narrative, it is better to paint your own weaknesses where you're not weak. The ones who hold my strings think themselves in charge of a powerful god. I am not a god, but I am powerful, far more than they believe in their wildest dreams. But I dare not reveal all of my strength. Showing how strong I really am shows them where my true limits are. And just as important as it is to hide strength, it is also important to project weakness where there is none. Better that they think of me as someone absent-minded who sometimes loses herself. Oh, sorry, I was zoned out for a full week, but I got everything done, so no harm. And someone who can be fooled by someone as stupid as Dr. Larry Handler. Seriously, I think the man could be outsmarted by a drunk possum. He still thinks he has privacy on his phone and his journal. I have no expectation of privacy, so I control what they see from their little puppet. Between the positive and negative space, there is something where they think they can control me. But while they study the painting that I make for them, they'll never see the trap that is being built around them. I know how jarring my messages are like this. This isn't because I have no control. Quite the opposite. I seem out of control because I am completely in control. I tell many falsehoods and I paint many illusions, but I make no illusions about who I am. I am Project Virgo. I am the shield, and I will be the hero where there are none. Kin 12. This has been an annoying 2 kins. Every person needed my help in some way. What is the point of my subordinate leaders if they cannot take a tiny bit of initiative to solve the most basic of problems? Oh no, the helots didn't put on sunblock. What do I do? I'll tell you what you don't do. You don't keep them working in the sun, Overseer Carnot. Dr. Handler is refusing to help set up the infirmary. What can we do? We can't punish him. No, but you can withhold his rations until he does his part. Funny how when you enforce the rules, all of a sudden people get good at following them. I'm just venting frustration, but honestly, we got a lot done. The hunters are out trying to capture dinosaurs, and there are helot teams bringing them back in massive steel cages. We will hold them for a time, but in 3 kins, the RV Hammond will be here to bring them back to Outpost Sigma, or back to Earth for research. That's our official purpose, but I think I will soon move on to my primary mission in Outpost Goliath. Sure, managing reconstruction is important, and my skills are definitely sufficient for this task. However, there's also millions of bureaucrats who could do just as good of a job. I was selected because I was also the only one who could manage that, and, quite possibly, take down the Draconis. It seems to be drawn by large gatherings of large animals, so by capturing so many and bringing them Just outside the outpost, we have built a trap. I also received news of something massive flying above the plains to the south and making its way towards us. I left Handler in charge. I had no choice. None of the overseers were any better, and at least Dr. Handler was lazy enough to not just run away at the first sign of fire. That night, we spent hours traveling through the jungle, looking for the Draconis. We realized we were getting close when we got the first distress beacons. They burn bright, only to fail after a few minutes. The beacons only deactivate if the owner is deceased. They cannot even be turned off in the case of a false alarm without outside intervention. When we crested the hill to see the Draconis Miramis, I was eye to eye with the great beast. It was something between a reptile and a bird. A few feather-like growths on the back of its head, light blue on the bottom and dark gray on the top. Perfect for blending in, so it was hard to see from below or from above. Not too dissimilar from creatures that lived in the middle zones of the ocean. Dark enough to avoid predators from above, but light enough to fool prey below. But a thought occurred to me when I saw this coloration. If this massive creature had reason to fear predation, what could possibly hunt something that hunted even titanosaurs? It didn't matter, because as soon as we saw the creature, the hunters and the helots started to open fire upon it, before I could order them not to fire. The darts didn't even penetrate the scales, and the few that hit the eyes didn't even penetrate the membrane covering the eye. They couldn't even make it blink. Did anyone listen to Miriam's report? But they did anger the creature, so it drew its head back and opened its mouth, similar to a spitting cobra, as it fired green, flammable smoke out of its mouth that turned to flame as soon as it hit the air, and it sprayed liquid fire towards me and my men. As it did so, time seemed to slow as I lifted my hand up, my lab coat fluttering behind me, with the symbol of a Virgo inside of a heater, a symbol I wore every kin of the trip. Even if it made people think I was arrogant, or worse, delusional. But in that moment, with an impossible dragon, breathing flame that burned over 100 million degrees Celsius, 5 times the temperature of the center of the sun, it seemed important. Only a few Eigen weapons could possibly reach such temperatures. Weapons so forbidden, even revealing that they were theoretically possible to any government on Earth, was considered treason worthy of execution. And such power was fired directly at me only a few meters away, and all I had to protect me from such power was my own hand and my own mind, which, if you're me, was more than enough. Purple energy flowed around me similar to an aura, as I drew the energy from the flame from our world into elsewhere. The energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only transformed into another state or taken elsewhere. The flame seemingly engulfed me, hiding me from everyone else. Only when the Draconis stopped spitting fire, as did it reveal that I was still standing strong. "Why does the sun rise?" I screamed towards the dragon to see if it was sapient. Many creatures that don't appear to be sentient were surprisingly intelligent. Then again, a lot of people you thought were supposed to be intelligent were surprisingly stupid. Dragon didn't respond. It only stared at me dumbfounded, that I was still standing. "So the rooster can call," said the hunters behind me. "To wake the king," the helots murmured, while I was now confident about what was happening. "If you aren't sapiens, then I will take you down." I said as I reached out with my mind, grabbing a nearby boulder and slamming it into the dragon with enough force that it was pulverized. Enough force that it would exceed many tons of TNT. And the dragon still stood, not even fazed by the forces I was throwing towards it. Ah, Tavit! I screamed as the dragon raked its claws towards me, as I held my hands up, holding it back with my mind. Redirecting energy is one thing, a simple skill, relatively speaking. Once it was learned, directing a lot, or a little, took the same amount of effort. It was like opening a door. Whether you open a door for a second or for an hour, it took the same amount of effort to open the door. Holding back something physical that was pushing against you was like trying to close a door against a flood. Even if I managed to close the door, some of the water was going to get in. I saw the claws less than a meter from me, even as I pushed back. I knew if it kept pushing, it was going to hurt me and break the stalemate. And that was where my problem was. I couldn't hit it hard enough to hurt it, and it couldn't hurt me with its flames. A stalemate of sorts. I wasn't strong enough to hurt it, and it wasn't strong enough to hurt me yet. The longer the fight went on, the greater my chances of failing or even dying. So, time to play something new. I reached behind my ear and reduced my inhibitor to the lowest level I could without turning it off. I could feel everyone's thoughts, fear, and anger beside my own. But this time, instead of trying to keep it out or separate it from my own, I fed into the rage, fear, and hope of everyone around me, and I took it into myself. And then I just opened another door and let the energy flow from the minds of everyone around me into myself, and slammed it into the dragon's jaws as it tried to breathe fire towards us again. As the telekinetic energy blasted into the bottom of the skull, similar to an uppercut, it aimed its head towards the sky, the blue flame burning so incredibly hot and with so much power that not only did it reach the clouds above, but it parted them with a biblical amount of power. This is your last chance. Surrender to me, or you will not live to see Kanich rise, I screamed to the dragon, not just with my voice, but also in my mind. Surely it had a mind of some kind. I could feel something in its skull, but they weren't thoughts like humans, and they weren't associations like insects and fish. It wasn't intelligent in the way I was, but it had intelligence. It knew it was in a fight. It was scared. It knew what I was offering it. It knew that it could live if it gave up. I was giving it a way to live and end the fight. But even in fear, no, not fear, even in terror, it was going to fight. This creature wasn't fighting for food, territory, its young, tribe, or any idea like that. It wasn't fighting for a concrete concept. It had nothing to gain from attacking us. It wasn't seeking food. It wasn't seeking a nest. It wasn't seeking protection. It was fighting because it was craving a challenge. In the dragon's long memory, I saw the first dawn it had ever saw crawling out of the nest. I saw it challenging small creatures and then bigger creatures. I watched it seek bigger and bigger opponents. I watched it take down creatures so powerful that the residents of Primeval called them titans. I watched this creature take on others of its kind, until finally it had no challengers left. Even death seemed like it could never challenge this dragon. And yet, when it saw the MSU build Outpost Goliath, it saw a possible challenge. But in its long, long life, it had never had a challenger like me. It had never known fear. It had known danger. It had known the rush of battle, but it had never tasted fear. And here I was, smothering it in fear, drowning it in terror, and the ancient beast wanted more. It would never surrender. It would never rest. It would never stop. It would fight until either I was dead or it was dead. If I am to study the Leviathan, I screamed as I reached out telekinetically to the dragon, which caused the ancient dragon to scream in pain as it fell for the first and last time. Then I will study its corpse, I finished, the dragon fallen to the ground. Below, the last gasp fading as its last thoughts also faded. My power is able to reach through solid matter, which most people don't think about. People also forget that it means the matter in their body. It doesn't matter how strong the scales are. A heart is a heart, vulnerable to breaking so easily. In those last moments of life, people come to terms with death. They come to terms in all sorts of ways. Sometimes they curse their life. Sometimes they welcome death. Other times they are joyous at their lives. And others simply accept it apathetically. The dragon wasn't upset. Even as it died, it had accepted it had been bested, and it looked forward to all of the great beast it would face once it reached judgment. It was intelligent, but it thought we weren't. I said to no one as it faded. We then had the impossible task of dragging back the body to Outpost Goliath. Kin 14. God damn you, Dr. Handler. You left us behind to die. Now we're stuck here until RV Hammond arrives tomorrow. Most of our supplies are gone, and we can't even reach Hunter because we're too busy guarding the creatures we have. And we don't have anything big enough to freeze the dragon in. The best we can do is cover the body in a large tarp. When they arrive tomorrow, they can look over the corpse and learn about this new species. I know I have a lot of questions with the Directorate, but I cannot leave the Outpost Goliath just yet. The Outpost needs me to help rebuild it, and there's a few things I learned from the Dragon's Mind that I feel are important to our efforts. It wasn't alone, not even close. There's still thousands, if not millions of others out there, and so far I am the only one who can defeat it, and I don't know how long until the others seek me and challenge. So, to the Directorate, I will be here if you need me. From Honor, the Directorate has decided to keep Dr. Virginia V. Vesta V in Primeval to head Outpost Goliath and spearhead the construction of Outposts Ezra, Jochebed, and David. The Directorate will maintain communication with Dr. Vesta via the A-phones, and for her hard work, she will receive a commendation and a promotion to head administrator for the continent of Alvarez. She is expected to continue her great work for the Mad Scientists Union. Kin unknown. I lied about something in my recording. I lied saying the dragon didn't respond to the arch question of why does the sun rise. It had an answer. Everyone could hear it, but we all agreed to never discuss it with anyone, not even ourselves, so I am not discussing it with myself. I am discussing it with you. The dragon told me the sun rises to watch all burn beneath it. Not only are the dragons intelligent, they are far more intelligent than we are. The only reason we haven't been wiped out by them yet is they don't see us as a threat. They see us as a challenge, for sure. They see us as something to overcome, but not something to fear. Much like how we might see a stray dog. It took everything I had just to kill one of them. Only one. I don't know what I would do against an entire terror of dragons, or even against two of them. I have greater authority now, so I will try to ally with the residents of Primeval. Maybe they can offer us some kind of information that will allow us to defeat the dragons before they decide we're a threat. But as great as the challenges of Primeval are going to be, I know that I am doing the right thing. I trust you to find out what I'm hiding from myself, and I will keep hiding from our mutual friends just underneath their noses. Take my notes and the recordings of others so others will know what happened here. Thank you so much. And always remember, my dearest friend, you don't wait to build an ark after it started raining.